I call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Clerk, please call or take the attendance.
Currently, Councilmember Bacon and Councilmember Wendell are unaccounted for.
Okay, we're expecting Councilman Wendell sooner or later this evening, but Patty will not be attending. Approve the agenda. I entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Avery,
Aye.
Brink,
Aye.
Collins,
Aye.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Tilton Burn.
Aye.
Motion passes. Is there any member of the public who wish to address the council on an item not listed on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on. On item next business is presentation of park master plan. Dusty, our Park and Rec Director, will present this item.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Just wanted to introduce Leon and Will Younger with Pros Consulting to present the final master plan for the Park and Rec Department. This has been a year-long process. We've covered a lot of ground from facilities, operations, the whole gamut of our department. And this is a comprehensive look and plan. This plan will help us move forward with specifics as we move forward over the next 10 years. So with that, I would like to introduce these gentlemen. Oh, and Lyle Pudwell as well with Confluence. Sorry, Lyle.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to share our final presentation to the Council. And Paul, thank you. Tonight, we're just going to go over our process, kind of the key themes, talk about our recommendations, capital improvement, and then have open discussion. So we'll get started. On this slide was accomplished through this process. So we had all of the site assessments were done for every park in the system. We've benchmarked the community, your agency against other agencies your size. We also did a full program assessment. We looked at the level of service that is provided here within the community of providing recreation facilities, parks, and trails. We did a whole mapping of the system. Our community engagement process was, I thought, extensive, and it really brought the community together in terms of the amount of information we had. We did a survey and the demographics and trends for the future. We did a maintenance review with your staff, and then we established prioritizations for the future. We did a capital and development plan, a financial plan, funding and revenue planning, and we also did an action plan that kind of allows staff to constantly bring information forward to you on a yearly basis about how well they're managing the plan. So this is kind of a overview, okay? Okay. The biggest themes that came out of this plan is people want trails, they want connectivity, they want the ability to run, walk, or ride on a trail through the area of the city, and it's connected, and this follows the same practice we're seeing across the country in relationship to trails being the number one amenity that people are looking for in a community. The community appreciates the variety of experiences that are here in the city and the quality of life in Brookings. They want you to take care of what you already own. You got a nice park system here with a lot of stuff to take care of, and people want you to take care of it. And the need for additional indoor recreation aquatics you'll see this in the plan show up pretty strongly. They want you to activate the parks you have by programming them. And also they would like to have year-round programming, not just seasonal. And need for additional funding for capital replacements. We know that this is an ongoing theme throughout the city, but certainly in the park system. And they value the partnerships with the university, the school district, and sports groups in the city. So as we went through this process, we did a level of service and really looked and compared the system to the current population, National Recreation Park standards. We tied the community survey based on unmet needs and what was important to people, as well as the benchmark communities. And then we looked at it also from a best practice agency through PRO's work in the last 26 years of doing this. We classified your parks. We also really tied into meeting the community needs and developed in total park acreage. You have a lot of land here, and you've invested a lot in parks, and part of this really demonstrates in the level of service. And probably the strongest need, again, I said earlier, that indoor recreation and aquatic space shows up really strongly as an unmet need. These GIS maps just demonstrate how parks are basically connected. This is many neighborhood, community, and special use parks all tied together, and virtually every part of the city, but few small areas, are not served by some type of park. But if I live next to a community park, that is my neighborhood park as well as my community park. But when you lay it all out this way, it really demonstrates that the park systems are pretty well distributed and really are matching the growth of the city. So we get into recommendations. We follow this community values model, and this is really a process that PROS has been doing for a number of years, where we really look at what the community's priorities are, and both what they would consider facilities, programs, and services, also looking at levels of service in terms of how your core services and facilities are matching up with community's expectations. We evaluate your standards that you have in place now for both programs, maintenance, operation, and land. And then how do you are financed is another element of the community values model, to look at alternatives to help you look at other funding options to help support the system for the future. We look at your partnerships with public, not-for-profit, and public-private, how well those partnerships are working, as well as how well you're organized within your own organization and within the city. So the vision statement, which I presented before, just demonstrates Brookings is a vibrant and desirable community providing attractive and well-maintained parks, trails, recreation facilities, programs, and customer service to the community while maintaining safe, accessible, and healthy natural park surroundings. When vision says this is what we want to be known for. Vision says how do we get there. So Brookings is a vibrant and desirable community, provide our mission. How do we get there? We provide great parks, trails, recreation facilities, and programs that benefit all residents and visitors through enjoyable experiences that make living in Brookings a community of choice. So within this, we wrote an action plan, and it's in your technical report that was sent to you all. But it really outlines the vision, the initiative. So the first initiative's examples, well-maintained and safe parks. And then our vision is, what do we want? Our vision for the parkland is to create the correct balance of park space dedicated to neighborhood parks, community parks, and trails across the city to ensure a balance of active parks and natural preserved areas. And then we have a goal, and that goal has a strategy, and then there are tactics associated with how to achieve it, the people responsible within the department, the start date, and then what are the performance indicators that demonstrate how well the staff has managed against that expectation. And this is an ongoing action plan that basically allows Dusty to come in every year through the budget process or a couple times a year and give you highlights about how well this plan is being put in place. And it really holds not only Dusty's team accountable, but really the expectation of all of you, if you adopt the plan, that this is what you want your park system to be. So the first one is well-maintained and safe parks. So the vision here is, our vision for parkland is to create the correct balance of parkland space dedicated to neighborhood parks, community parks, and trails across the city to ensure a balance of active parks and natural preserved areas. And then the actions, the recommendations are, opportunities for self-directed recreation are provided through an extensive system of well-maintained parks, trails, paths, natural areas, Neighborhood parks and community are activated through effective park design and amenities that bring a sense of place, support the community recreation needs, and create a positive experience. And that trails are connected through an easy-to-understand bike pathway system of trails and on-street sidewalks that allow for any user to walk, run, or bike. Also, Brookings Parks and Rec maintains and operates a wide variety of amenities in parks both year-round and seasonally to serve residents and visitors of all age groups in a positive and safe environment. Park assets are maintained in a proper life cycle manner to encourage positive use and year-round use through appropriate maintenance and replacement schedules, and then consistent signage to educate users about parks, wayfinding, safety, and trails, and then establish a standard for land in the system that is left in a natural state. And most systems like yourself would have 20 to 30% of their land left in a natural state because people respect that and appreciate it. Initiative 2 is high-performing park and facility management. So Brookings Park and Rec achieves high levels of community support and satisfaction, is governed and managed in an efficient and cost-effective manner, provides great value from taxes and user fees. So in this one, the Park and Recreation Board policies and bylaws are updated to follow responsible management of the Park and Rec system. So they're current, and the Park and Recreation Department maintains effective interagency relationships with the Public Works Department and the City Manager's Office, and then update pricing policies and partners policies that are established to create equity between partners and user groups. The key performance indicators will be established for all operational divisions. Again, this demonstrates efficiency and effectiveness of the work that the staff does. Use technology to enhance effectiveness and efficiency, and as well as a higher level of impact on support of users' experience. Data is a major element that we're wanting to introduce as much as possible into this plan. Create a volunteer program to assist with park maintenance. You have a good volunteer program in certain areas of the park system now, but through park maintenance could be stronger, and that was one of the major recommendations. Ensure staffing of park maintenance is aligned with community expectations, because people have a lot of pride in the park system here in town. 3 is enhanced program services and experiences. So Brookings Park and Rec vision for programs and services is to activate more park and recreation facilities that serve a wider audience and provide residents the ability to connect to the system. To do that, we need to consider adding a total of 2 to 4 additional core programs in the system that could include. These are elements that came out of our public engagement, adding summer camps as a program, more special events, adding adult and fitness and wellness, environmental education, adventure programs, people with disability programs, lifelong learning programs, STEM programs, and programs for active adults. These are things that people basically said, and we recognize that this takes effort and staff to do this, but in the future, as the city continues to grow and also the community expectation, adding core programs broadens your user base and also you serve more people. And then develop a feasibility study for an indoor aquatic and community center facility that serves a multitude of core programs that can support the programs outlined in the most cost-effective manner. And we know that this, if you've heard it all as well, that this has been a priority. I know that you've been through, I don't know how many years ago, but an issue where people could vote or not. This is a different type of a facility than the one that you put out in the first time you went out for a community center. Park amenity utilization, cost recovery, and user satisfaction of amenities are optimized through scheduling, staffing, and amenity access, and through effective fee policies. A cost of service study is conducted on any new programs or facilities to determine the true cost and cost effectiveness. This way, you don't build things and you're not able to operate in them. You know exactly what it's going to cost to operate it before you build it. And an effective marketing plan is created to enhance the use of all park mediums, to encourage more community awareness, use, and appreciation for program services. There's a lot going on here, but there's a lot that the community said they did know and would like to know. Initiative 4 is enhanced financial management, so maximize the value of all parks and facilities to achieve the highest value of use and return on investment. So to do that, develop business plans for all revenue-producing facilities within the system to maximize the use, efficiency of programs and services and staffing, and to reduce the need for tax support. A long-term funding strategy and financial plan for capital investment and reinvestment, and consider a business improvement district downtown to assist in maintenance costs. This is something we see in communities your size, where the business community is partnering with the park system and landscaping and flowers and all the things that go along with downtown. In financial management, consider the creation of a park foundation to increase capital and operating dollars. This is a very giving community and a very caring community. The ability to look at an outside funding source to help, especially on matching dollars for grants, is a real positive for a town this size. And evaluate land leases on excess property for commercial investment to generate revenue to offset operating costs. Consider a land dedication ordinance on new development to cover capital costs in lieu of parkland, and consider an impact fee on new development to cover capital costs for future citywide attractions. All right.
So another one of the action items with the master plan was kind of evaluating the capital improvement plan and integrating kind of the new items and the findings from the park and facility assessments within that 5 and 10 year capital improvement plan. So we went through an exercise with Dusty and the staff to kind of go through those evaluations of existing assets, and then kind of look at the information from the study that came out of the surveys to kind of come up with those list items that needed to be added. Costs for those were developed based on local and regional historical cost data, and then those improvements were integrated within the capital improvement plan in 3 kind of tiers, those being critical and sustainable alternatives, expanded services, and visionary alternatives. So those critical and sustainable alternatives are prioritized spending within the existing budget targets, focuses on deferred maintenance and life cycle replacement of existing assets and amenities. So just basically keeping up with things that need to be addressed within the existing system. So some of those representative projects that were added to the CIP were some court reconstruction costs, some trail repairs, playground equipment replacement within a number of parks, and then updated park signage to just kind of bring the branding and consistency throughout the system. Expanded services, those items are fairly self-explanatory. It's extra services that the capital improvements plan should be undertaking when additional funding is available. Those include kind of a strategically enhancing existing assets within the existing parks or facilities to better meet the park and recreational needs of the community. And these items would typically require additional operational and capital funding. So some examples of those items that were added are bike trail extensions throughout the community, splash park, pickleball courts, and in an additional community garden site. And then the third kind of bucket of spending is those visionary alternatives, and those are represent a complete set of services and facilities desired by the community, but it is fiscally unconstrained. So, but they can help provide the policy guideline by illuminating or illustrating the ultimate goals of the parks and recreation system and providing that long-range look to address future needs and deficiencies. So those visionary alternatives address complete renovations to aging parks or facilities, the development of new parks, or the development of new facilities to kind of meet a gap in need. So the representative projects for the CIP that came out of that exercise, the big one, of course, was the Indoor Community and Recreation Center, a new sledding hill, and opportunities with winter recreation, Miracle Ball Field, and then in the additional ball fields to kind of meet the demand of the community. So with those 3 buckets, it ended up being about 48 new improvements across the park and rec system, totaling 2.5 million in new critical sustainable improvements, 850,000 in expanded services, and then the 34.8 million in potential visionary investments. And again, a big portion of that comes with the aquatic and recreation center.
So, do you have questions for us that we can answer regarding our process and our recommendations, and answer anything that you'd like to ask us about?
Any council members got any questions or comments? Councilmember Brink.
About 435 surveys or so were. Would you say that's a normal amount in comparison with other communities in which you do this type
Yeah.
of procedure?
Yeah.
Okay.
The thing is, it's statistically valid. It follows the demographics of your community, plus or minus 4%. So if we did the same thing over 100 times, we'd get the same results, 4%, but plus or minus. But the biggest thing is the level of service. Not only did we do it for the statistically valid, but we also did it online, so anybody could give us access. So we did it both ways and through the public improvement. So I said earlier we talked to over 1,000 people, or had 1,000 people. That's a really strong number for this size of town. So.
Maybe a related question to that. Was there any particular demographic that you received maybe the abundance of feedback from, or was it pretty level throughout
It was
different?
all, I think it really representative of your community. I think, the things that people want are, of course, coming out of a pandemic, is access, and they want to celebrate living in the city. And part of that is being able to have both indoor and outdoor spaces. And I know that you guys have all been through this before, but Aquatics showed up really strongly as a place that people, both from the school district and university and the residents, all kind of see that as an important element in the future. But also that the last facility you built was more sports driven versus recreation driven, where there's abundance of other types of programs can be involved in the community facility versus, and we call that multi-generational spaces, so that it has a much broader audience.
Any Councilmember Wendell.
Thank you, Mayor. I notice on the action plan you'd had recommended a business improvement district for the downtown neighborhood. And I was kind of curious if the focus of a district like that would be kind of cost recovery, or if it creates greater buy-in in the district. What are some of the benefits?
It's a greater buy-in. I think when everybody participates, everybody feels good about it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think the park system has they're really trying to do the best they can with the money they have, but it's also nice when you have a bid district where they're investing in themselves. Mm-hmm. And everybody has a feeling that this was our space and we want to make it the best possible, inviting space as possible. And I'm not saying the park system has done a bad job. It's not that at all. It's just the idea that it's really trying to create a source of revenue to enhance it stronger than what it already is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
For the work that you've done on this, of outlining what you have in the plan, and I know it's been a long endeavor to put this plan together, so thank you all for your work and for the work done by our Parks Committee. The question I have is in relation to the maintenance volunteer program that you had mentioned. I think that's a really interesting idea, and I'm wondering if you know of examples of other communities that have something like that implemented and how it would work.
So repeat the question. You're wanting to know what other agencies like yourself that have that abundance of core programs?
Other communities that have the volunteer maintenance program that you had mentioned.
Gosh, that's pretty, I hate to say it, but it's pretty standard, quite frankly. The standard really is, in a lot of communities, best practices is 15% of the workforce hours are made up of volunteers. Sometimes agencies like yourself will have a volunteer be the volunteer coordinator. Sometimes they pay the volunteer. But in this type of community where you have students and sororities and fraternities, and they all get involved in helping to take care of the park system as part of giving back. School districts do it. but having somebody to coordinate it is an important element, and it really brings out the best. Plus the fact not only placing volunteers, but training volunteers. And it's hard for that to occur within the park system staff itself. And, the best thing is you never wear out a volunteer. Why people leave volunteerism is because there's nothing to do. They sign up, they go do something, and they stand around and kick rocks. And the intent is they want to be active when they do that.
What types of maintenance do you typically see these volunteer groups doing? Is it cleaning up the parks? Is it
Clean up,
upgrading
fix
things?
ups. So you go by kind of neighborhood by neighborhood, getting sites ready for, let's just say you have a major baseball tournament. People come in and they clean the whole stands and get ready for, it's kind of companies coming. Anytime you have special events, people to register people, help people get in the right locations where their booths need to be, all the things that are coordinated. It's difficult to have a staff person. You need an army of people to do that. And, this town really sets up for events, but it takes volunteers to help put it on. And the more volunteers that you have, the greater the engagement that and the advocacy that comes with it. When people pick up a piece of paper, they become an advocate. And the biggest thing is to see them when they volunteer to support the city. It's a powerful thing.
So this last weekend, there's a great example, and Dusty, I don't know if you want to come forward and talk a little bit about that volunteering opportunity of the group that just occurred.
Sure, I can talk briefly. Actually, the last 2 weekends, we visited with a volunteer group that has spent a majority of the last 2 weekends developing what we're calling discovery trails at the Dakota Nature Park. A group of volunteers. We're excited about that. We kind of walked through that with them. That was part of the original master plan of the nature park itself. There's we've got nice, great hard surface trails there, but there was, a desire for what, we'll call exploration or discovery trails. And over the last 2 weekends, a core group of volunteers has created almost 3/4 of a mile of those trails at the Dakota Nature Park. Hope to finish that up in the spring of next year. So, fortunate to have that committed group of volunteers for that project.
And that's just a great example where, as a parks department, we don't have enough staff to do everything that we would like to do, and in capitalizing on volunteers that would love to participate in that process. Dusty, the consultants, if you could maybe talk a little bit about the steps moving forward now as well.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, as far as the next steps, our hope is we wanted to give you this presentation and an opportunity to ask some questions. Our intention would be to either next week or the following council meeting, bring this back to you and request, your full adoption of this plan. This is something that, we'd like to move forward with. After we do that, we will take all this information back to the park board. They've obviously been involved in this from the very beginning. And we will take that together as a group, as the board, and prioritize and strategize how we will move forward. If you've looked through that action plan, there's a lot of stuff in there, and there's some dates in there. We just needed to put dates in there. That action plan is actually going to be our working document for both the board and the staff as we move forward. So, we will prioritize that and start knocking them off.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for your presentation. I got a couple questions myself. You were talking about the indoor recreational facilities, Aquatic Center. What is your vision of that? Are you looking at separate buildings? Are you looking at one great big facility?
Well, typically,
what works?
the best community, 4 core spaces. So they have an aquatics facility, sports courts, they have a walking track, and they have fitness elements within it. So at least those 4. But there are also program rooms that are available for youth, for young teenagers, adults, and all those program spaces are multifunctional spaces, so they'll be used for multiple different types of programs. And typically those include spaces for people of all ages, seniors, and really the ability to provide opportunities for people to interact together, recreate together, learn together. So it's a learning center, recreation center, sports facility, aquatic facility in one. But the biggest issue is it has the whole goal is to create the widest age segment appeal. And so everybody sees themselves in that place, and it becomes the center of the community in terms of where people want to go. It's not just set up for a certain group of people that only get it for their activities.
Okay, and then piggyback on that, have done this. Do you have any recommendations of cities that are, say, our population, some kind of the same visions that this city has that have been successful programs, or ones to not do because they didn't work out?
Well, most of the agencies, and they feel like that it's their space, they advocate for it. It's where it's single focus space is where it's the most difficult space to actually get support for. And where the space is multifunctional, and actually it's a place for the community to gather, to celebrate, to learn, to become fit, to experience opportunities in an indoor space, to meet their neighbors while they're walking on the track, to feel healthy. Those kind of spaces, people get. And, in your town, and, I consider this a fairly cold weather city. And so when that process, having that extra space, you build a year-round customer. So right now you have a really strong customer base when it comes to April, May, and through October and early November. But when it gets cold, people are outside. We recognize that, but you do limit the amount of people comfort level. And so that opportunity we see, and I think your public really came out pretty strongly in our public engagement and through both surveys that was a priority.
Thank you. I know we've got some partners. Do you have any comments or come on up?
In their study, if they compared Brookings to surrounding comparable cities like Watertown, Aberdeen, Mitchell, Pierre, especially when it comes to a rec center and aquatic center, even like Madison.
Well, Mitchell has a aquatic center. I think that's pretty comparable. They have a new aquatic facility in that, as well as sports courts and wellness and fitness spaces. I'm just looking here for which one is it? Benchmark is 35. So we looked at Kearney, Laramie, Aberdeen, Brookings, and Hayes. Okay, that we tried.
So there's other, are we the only one without a rec center and aquatic center in our?
Let me see. What's that? Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking at the, Dusty probably knows these agencies better than what I've got here. I'm just looking here in terms of facilities. What's that? Which one? Okay, sorry. Good question. I just want to answer it.
While they're looking, when you were talking about volunteer
Yeah.
services, a couple years ago, we did a volunteer service at the golf course where we pulled out a bunch of shrubs, stained the cart sheds. They're being redone now, but that was all volunteer work.
So basically, everybody's got a community space, but what was the? But Kearney didn't, right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
You're
Have
welcome.
any other-
I have one more question.
Another park board member?
Founders. I just want to let you know that we are excited about having a roadmap, and I think that the department and the board, if you adopt this, which I hope you will consider adopting it, will see just a path forward with a clear vision. And I think 5 to 10 years from now, our community is really going to see the results of this and this plan in a positive way. So I hope you consider adopting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember,
I just wanted to know in the adoption line that we're committing ourselves to with a public indoor recreation center or a funding mechanism or any of those details.
No, not at this time. Once again, it's just a plan, but the plan does call out amenities and ideas and thoughts that the public would like to have. Once again, as any plan, you try to outline the financing, the mechanisms, the time and place, but at the same time, I've often recommended to staff to never let money get in the way of discussions and good ideas, because sometimes opportunities present itself, either through a grant, through a donor, where you can move some of your city cash. City council does have city council financial policy projects that they can recommit to projects like this, but we do have other projects on the book, such as the police facility and things like that. But no, it does not commit you to any large project indoor facility in the near future.
Councilmember Collins?
It is a 10-year plan. Okay.
Councilmember Collins.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very good, and I went through your appendixes or your appendix stuff, and I can't say the word right. But anyways, I'm wondering, in your experience, have you ever seen any of the buildings built with grants?
Buildings what?
Any of the buildings built with grants?
Oh,
The
yeah.
Indoor rec.
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while, there are grants that come along where it involves infrastructure, indoor facilities, but usually they require a match, pretty good match. The best grants are those that have a match, a big match, because people say, well, we'll match you if you put money into it too, versus free. But I really think the way most agencies are building facilities today, they're doing it through partnerships, where you have a community of people who need similar kind of space, and they jointly decide not to try to do it themselves, but to invite other people into the process so they all contribute to the capital and to the operations. And those are the most successful as well, because they bring their base of users in to the organization. It's just everybody has to learn to share.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember A.
I don't know even who I should direct. A relatively new building that's south of town on 77. It's an indoor rec center. Who's in charge of that, and what functions are done there?
Dusty, you want to talk to that? I think he's talking about the indoor soccer facility that's privately owned.
Okay, you pretty much covered it.
Well, maybe what you could do is talk about the user groups and how it came together.
Okay, yeah, that facility down there, what, Main and 32nd, is that what? Yeah, that was basically constructed through the, they changed their name though, but the soccer club in town. And it's pretty much private space at this point, for their use. And I think they're going to contract with Friends of Baseball for some use in there and what have you. But that was developed through the soccer club.
Okay. That should be it. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you for the opportunity to work in your city. We enjoyed it very much. You got a beautiful town.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Right. But we don't have public comment. But since it's Harry, we can allow public comment on this, but it was basically just questions from the council.
Whoever wants to answer or address it, Pro Consulting has made a good presentation. Now, my question, the whole big situation is, who's to be the driver to get this indoor rec center I'm talking about, that we need to accomplish a lot of different and fulfill a lot of different needs in our community? Who's to be the driver? The rec board? You counselors? Or someone from private enterprise? To get it done, we need to start with somebody or the community to move forward. Then the next question I have, what percentage, do you have a suggestion as far as percentage of dollars to build and maintain a rec center? How much of that should come or may come from private enterprise versus the government or the rest of the community citizens?
The movement in the country, when we talk about private enterprise, the biggest private enterprise for community centers are from hospitals, who basically invest in rehab centers and rehab pools, as well as fitness components, because they're interested in the health of the community, and it gives them a place to basically invest. But they like the market that is available from community recreation centers. So that's a major movement in this country in relationship to funding. Secondly is any type of sports association that has dollars, and a lot of them do. But probably the biggest thing right now that people are really looking at is the ability to tie wellness and aquatics together, because both of those have really wide age segment appeal. I mean, you start a 2-year-old swimming, and you're swimming when you're 85, and the same thing is in fitness. I mean, every single agency we work with, everybody talks about the need for more fitness, but nobody owns the fitness market. It's a market that everybody wants to get healthier, and so this provides a catalyst to do it. The other thing is finding, usually extensions are, libraries are always good extensions with park systems, as well as arts. The arts and parks go together, and in fact, a lot of agencies, it's Parks, Recreation, and Arts is in their name, because they see the value of connectivity and the value of working together and celebrating your community together, and a lot of that is also built in. The biggest thing is finding the right people who want to invest in something. These facilities last. I mean, they're 50, 60, 70-year-old facilities. And so it's not like it's one generation, it's 7 or 8 generations of people enjoying that resource.
Thank you. And I guess, I'll too, is I think Dusty and the park board should be our driver. I think we should be a support system here, as a council and mayor. They're invested in this more than we are. They know what's going on already. They know the works of the park and rec department.
Right.
I think Paul and Dusty and the park board should be our first front runners, and then we can be behind them in the support of it. I don't know if anybody else has got the same thoughts about it, but Councilmember Tiltonburn.
I just wanted to maybe state that it doesn't necessarily outline who should be the driver of a parks facility. This is a much more broad, holistic plan for our entire parks department. And while, of course, having a indoor recreation facility and aquatic center is one of the elements in this plan and something that our community's talked about for a long time, this plan really is far more robust than just any one project like that. And by no means does this plan outline what our steps would be to get to an aquatic center. Rather, it's putting that on our horizon as something that was noted as something that would be desirable and probably useful in our community. So I think to say that this plan would say who the driver should be or how we should get there or even how we would fund it is probably a little premature at this point. And really, this is just the starting point for us to have that visionary forward thinking in terms of what should we be looking at and how can we start to think about getting there.
Have you seen any particular percentage of cost that you experience from private enterprise and the community together? Do you have any examples?
I've seen it as much as 50% of a community center that I would call a multi-generational center, as up to 50%, but most of the time it's in the 15 to 20%, and which is still a pretty substantial amount of money.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Harry. Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. Item 6. Paul will start this out. Outside agency funding.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. This is the second year of City engages the United Way to assist in making a recommendation to City Council for outside agency funding. Just to recap the schedule and process that we've set last year through City Council. In October, November, we'll bring the city or the United Way to City Council to discuss priorities and the rubric for making recommendations back to City Council. In December and January, United Way will receive and evaluate all applications, and this is for any non-for-profit agency within the community. They don't have to be United Way agencies. Any agency can make the application, and the United Way will review those applications and utilize the rubric to make a recommendation back to City Council. In January of this coming year, City Council will receive, or January, February, early in the year, will receive a community impact report from United Way. That will be based on 2021 funding. I did include in the packet the approved 2021 funding that City Council made this last year for outside agencies. Once again, in January, February, the United Way will bring those recommendations back to City Council, and City Council ultimately makes the final determination of funding. Once again, this is just a recommendation from United Way, but tonight's discussion is really to determine whether or not the items discussed last year are still priorities for City Council. Main areas: health, education, self-sufficiency for the rubric really drive their analysis. And last year, City Council did list affordable housing, youth development, diversity, government stewardship, health, safety, and transportation as their highest priorities. So this year within the budget, we have identified roughly $240,000, which is an increase from last year budgeted amount. We were able to increase it slightly about $40,000 because we had two agencies that chose not to use the money. They were able to receive monies from federal government. So we did have a little bit more last year to spend. This year, once again, it's an increase from the budgeted amount last year to $240,000. So tonight's discussion is really to surround whether or not these are still the priorities of City Council, and to give the United Way direction, and to talk further about the process if you should have questions of the process. I did note within the memo, it's our intention as of staff to bring back further recommendations later on this year on funding for outside agencies through the ARP, American Rescue Plan funds that the city did receive. We received the first payment, $2.2 million here just a few weeks ago, and we'll receive the other half of the payment here in about a year and a half. And so our intention is to make a recommendation here before too long on those funds. But once again, tonight's discussion is at $240,000. It's budgeted for outside agencies, and whether or not the priorities that are listed in front of you are still the priorities of the City Council. Heidi is here, the director for the United Way, so she could answer any questions you might have as well on the process.
Okay, before we start discussion, entertain a motion to approve.
Still moved.
Second.
Okay. Anybody from the public want to comment on this item, or Heidi, do you want to make any comments? Pretty much the same process as we did last year, so we all kind of know the
Can I have a point of clarification? What are we at this moment?
approving to have United Way do this for us.
In front of you. So that last year, I'd recommend council make an amendment to the process to set the priorities for this year's outside agencies. If council isn't set on it tonight, I could also bring it back at the next regular meeting to set it as well. So it just depends on what council wants to do.
So the motion is to have the areas outlined on the screen in front of us be our priority areas again for 2022.
Correct.
So yes, I'm Heidi Gullickson with the Executive Director with the United Way. So just here to answer any questions on the process. On our end, it went fairly smoothly. We've made a little bit of adjustments within our own systems to hopefully make it go even smoother this next year if you choose to use us again as kind of that partner within reviewing those applications and bringing back that recommendation.
I have a question.
Councilmember Brink?
Question for you, Heidi. I'm curious, the word diversity there, what does that actually mean in relation to how we would think about these requests? What are you looking at?
If we were to receive a program that would be teaching on diversity, equity, inclusion, those types of things, I would think that would fall under that. Again, these were things that came forward last year, so we are open to you guys adjusting those, just knowing that our community has changed over the year, and if you guys were to choose knocking a couple off of there or moving a couple up, kind of looking at that way. So the organizations are the ones who say this program fits into one of those categories.
Got it. I guess for me, I would consider maybe transportation and transit a little bit higher priority, potentially. And I'm not sure if I consider diversity to be our third highest priority in terms of funding for this particular aspect of our budget.
Councilmember Tiltonburg?
Are these listed in priority order?
I remember affordable housing being at the top, but otherwise I don't remember offhand how they were listed from you guys last year. I think transportation was probably higher as well. We'd have to go back and look, but this was off of the list from last year.
Yeah, as I recall, it was just the prioritized areas. I don't think you guys ranked them.
Right.
But if you want to rank them, that's entirely up to city council if you have a higher weighting on others.
I would actually hesitate to rank them in part because we have a little bit of an idea of the submissions we tend to get. And I don't know that changing the ranking is going to change a lot in terms of what applications we get. I think we see a lot of returning applicants. And so I think their focus is going to be their focus. And I don't know that us ranking these is going to impact all that much the applications we get. So I would hesitate to rank them, I guess, in any order. I do have a question maybe more for staff about how we go about identifying the priority areas that are in this process through United Way, because I think we have a lot of examples of other nonprofits or community organizations that we provide funding to that don't go through this particular process. And so it would be helpful to maybe better understand what stipulates an organization for falling into this process versus another process so that we can maybe adequately identify what those prioritized areas would be.
Sure. So if you look at our outside agencies, really we pool them into two different funds. One of them is the Economic Development Agency funds. And so if they're directly tied to economic development, we fund them out of 3B, pillow tax, and a little bit of a general fund as well. I believe the research park gets about $150,000 out of there. School is another one that we just fund directly as well. It's about $198,000. I can't quite remember the exact number. Anything else that's a non-for-profit, if you will, and provides a social service, then goes through this funding mechanism. And so what we did is when this originally started here about a year ago, we looked at historically how we had funded them in the past, and it seemed to align fairly well with that. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So essentially, we've got economic development, we've got the school, and then we've got this pool of everything else, and that falls in this category.
Correct. That everything else really seemed to fit non-for-profits and social service agencies. It's also based on the funding. So 3B and pillow tax can only fund economic development agencies or marketing and things of that nature, depending on whether it's 3B or pillow tax. These agencies are really funded solely out of the general fund. So general fund, you have a little bit more leeway to fund outside agencies with.
Thank you, Mayor. Heidi, you explained a little bit of, what your vision of the term diversity might mean in terms of defining it as an impact area. When I look back at the agencies that we funded in 2021, it looks like we hit agencies that would be related to maybe 5 of those impact areas, but the other one we didn't hit was government stewardship. How would you define government stewardship?
I'd really see what the application came in at to see how they felt their program fell under that. You know, those programs are saying this is where we fit in. They see that there's this grant opportunity available, and then they would put that in. So then it's really going through that rubrics and saying what kind of impact are they making, all of those, hitting those things, and seeing, you know, being able to know what kind of impact they would be making in the community with those dollars. So I don't know what that program might look like because we haven't necessarily had one come in yet.
And I apologize. I'm sure I was at the table when we picked those 2 words together and added them to this list. They just don't mean anything to me right now. So I'm just curious if anyone recalls what we meant by the term government stewardship.
Actually, this list comes from your governance and ends policies and prior past applications. So really, it was made by prior councils. And so we just brought that forward last year. And once again, it's a new process. So if council feels some of these words aren't relevant anymore, or areas aren't relevant, maybe it's, and I know we've talked individually some mental health, you know, this last year, a huge increase in that need. Maybe that takes a higher priority over government stewardship. So it's really up to council to give that direction. But just so you know, this really wasn't created by you last year. It was approved by you, but it maybe was past councils that set this.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Go ahead, Nick.
If I'm looking at the agencies that we funded, it does look like we kind of looked at the term health and did tuck mental health under that. And I maybe would affirm, I hope that we can continue to do that. I think it's a priority. If we don't define it as a separate priority, I do hope that we still link it to health as a prioritized area.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Nick. All right. Any other discussion?
Brink,
Aye.
Collins,
Aye.
Niemeyer,
Aye.
Tilton Burn,
Aye.
Wendell,
Aye.
Avery.
Aye.
Motion passes. Introduction to topics for future discussion. Anybody have anything they want to bring up this evening? Councilmember Tilton Burn.
Kind of in relation to what we just discussed through and kind of talked about what our priorities areas are going to be, but I think it would be really helpful at a future meeting to talk a little bit more in depth about the process behind that. Not so much the priority areas, but really the process of how we go through funding these nonprofits, accepting these applications, receiving feedback from the applications once they've received and utilized the funds. I think it would be good for us to have a really strong idea of how that whole cycle happens, because I don't know that, at least I, as of today, really fully understand not only how we go about awarding each of the individual applications, but then how we receive feedback from those organizations once they've utilized the funds, and just having a little bit of reporting out on how the funds were used.
Yeah, it's up to council. Heidi's here now if you want to have that conversation, or if you want us to prepare it for a work session later, we can certainly do that as well. Entirely up to council.
Anybody else have any comments to that? Later, we can maybe do it after Heidi is, and her group has gone through the process.
I certainly don't want to put Heidi on the spot. I don't want to ask questions to maybe be asking or to have answered. So maybe a future meeting would be more appropriate. And even I, the one who's bringing up this idea, I don't know that I've fully wrapped my mind around exactly what all of my questions are around that, but I just know that I have some questions. So I think maybe a future meeting might be more appropriate.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to kind of talk that through, and we're using basically the same process that we use with the United Way application, so it's pretty streamlined for the agencies as well. But we can talk about how that process happens and how our board reviews those and makes the decisions and use that rubrics.
And I would follow up by saying that my questions might not just be for Heidi and United Way, but even for us and our process too. I know that at our last meeting, we had discussed similar thoughts around how we're providing funds to economic development and how we get feedback about how those funds are used. And I think that if we are to be good stewards of the dollars that we allocate, I think I mentioned this at the last meeting that a lot of times when you apply for grants, there's then a report that you have to go through to explain how you used grant dollars. I'm not necessarily saying that we have to do that exact process with everybody that we provide funding to, but just some kind of process maybe where we get a fuller picture of what the city dollars are being used for in all of these different areas.
I'd recommend that we bring that back in November's work session, Heidi. So mid-November, we'll have a work session.
Okay.
Just so that if there is any changes the council wants, we can implement that in the January, February or actually December, January process. So look for that in November.
Councilmember Avery.
I guess I would just comment that when I looked at this, I had heard so much about the system and the rubric and everything, and when I looked at this, I was struck by how short the list was, and how about 3 or 4 agencies get the lion's share of the money. So I don't know how that, my question would be, are those the only agencies that apply that fit the criteria that we have, or is it up to the agency to decide if they should be applying for this pool of money or the United Way pool of money or both? Or I just wasn't, I just, like I say, I was just, I was expecting the list to be longer. It doesn't look like there's all that much to it from what I see here.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of background in that process. And in November, what we can do is bring that information back to you as well.
Okay.
Okay. I know I kind of put a review in last meeting of what is coming up on the agenda for next week. We have second readings, of course, of the Park Board incorporating the bike deal, adoption of 10-year CIP, adoption of consolidated fee schedule. Right now, we just have the 2022 budget for first reading, and then change order on facility waste collection, employee contract, police department contract. Anything else added to that yet, Bonnie?
No, it's a pretty light agenda.
All right. There's nothing else going on tonight. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.